awful lot of fiction. I really enjoy reading novels, perhaps to the detriment of reading other things. And I suppose my biggest flaw is I find it impossible to put a book down that I've already started. I won't give up on that book. Like many people, I'm sure, in the room, I've always got a book on the go. What I enjoy about reading fiction so much is how I find it penetrates and permeates into those other parts of my life. A friend recommended a book to me recently, and I ordered it on Amazon.co.uk, and the book arrived, and I was about a third of the way through it before I realised that the book that I had been reading wasn't the book that had been recommended, but a book that had the same name. I was reading this book at the International Theatre Festival in Transylvania, in a town in Romania called Sibiu, where my company were performing a piece of our work called It's a Question of Taste, which is a piece of work that is essentially the documentation of me and my partner in the company travelling around pretending to be food critics. This book that I had read, or that I was reading in Romania, was about Manchester, and more specifically about prostitutes working in Manchester. And I found that the worlds of those Manchester prostitutes and the experience that I was having in Transylvania, although seemingly unrelated at first, started to somehow make sense for me. One part of my imagination, our lives leaching into one another, changing and transforming, different but still very relevant, different parts, I suppose, of my mirror, perhaps different parts of different broken mirrors that I am struggling to fit together. But when they are put together, they don't really reflect a true image, but they certainly reflect a version of one. Roland Barthes, in Death of the Author, many of us will be familiar with, says this: "We know now that a text is not a line of words releasing a single theological meaning, i.e. the message of the author God, but a multi-dimensional space in which a variety of writings, none of them original, blend and clash. The text is a tissue of quotations drawn from the innumerable centres of culture. Once the author is removed, the claim to decipher a text becomes quite futile. To give a text an author is to impose a limit on that text, to furnish it with a final signifier, to close the writing. In the multiplicity of writing, everything is to be disentangled, not deciphered." This reminds me a little of one of the best pieces of advice that I was given as an undergraduate student by a tutor of mine, who said to me, when you're making work, performance work in this context, it was really important not to become precious, not to claim too much ownership of that work, so that when the moment comes where you really need to edit that material, when you need to lose things, that's not such a difficult task to do. He didn't put it perhaps quite so eloquently. He said that we must learn to kill our babies. I suppose there was a time, and I think there may still be, the assumption often that artists that find themselves in academia are there because they need to teach to pay the rent. They need to fill that part of their lives in order then to make room for the really creative stuff that is their practice. And recently, those of us who are from the UK will be aware a number of funding cuts. I know more specifically in the area of experimental or small-scale theatre, in order to make way for funding preparation for the Olympics in 2012. And even more so then, we understand that artists that are involved in the academy might not just be there because they want or have to as single reasons. Many artists now, I suppose, that are involved in institutions are shouldering the responsibility, not just for artists that are graduating out of those institutions to go on with their practice, but also that really interesting practice may well be happening within the institutions themselves. So the university then becomes responsible not only for nurturing the artists of tomorrow, but actually sustaining the artists of today. And there's potentially there a really interesting blending of those practices of teaching and learning, and those more conventional position of professional practice. So is the ground ready? Perhaps I've just cut my finger on one of those pieces of glass on the floor. Anna First, who is a writer and theatre director, says that it's not that the subjects being taught in universities aren't vividly contemporary, but that the linguistic apparatus by which they are being explored is the language of postmodern academia and not the language of postmodern artists. But what if those academics are the artists? With now further recognition, particularly in the performing arts, as practice as research, of practice as research. Is there a sense that perhaps older scholarly traditions are being held onto, that more traditional language is being held close to the chest in the hope of staying in control, of being able to still understand? Perhaps it's rather like this. Think of an art restorer peeling the paint off a portrait to find other portraits underneath. You ruin a perfectly good painting out of some misplaced curiosity, the possibility of other portraits. It's a kind of endless substitution, and all because we don't know how to deal with things as they are. Because this is what it's about. We believe in achieving the summit as expected. We'll detonate an avalanche effect. We'll bust a wreck. We'll watch a series of events connect to chain reaction, set off like a fusion experiment in which we can calculate and document the elements and their effects with patience. We'll put it all down in scientific notation. This is like a laboratory report of sorts, research, results, a layout of our findings and methods that work. Here is our agenda, an easily defensible census of live ammunition fire. Bullet point 5. We believe in looking alive and recognised by the makeup of our character, eyes, and by our merits and vibes, not as indistinguishable in appearance, but as equal keepers of the inextinguishable